Imagine staring at a talking fish with a human face, berating you from behind the glass of your television screen. It knows your name, it remembers your conversations, it asks you about your life, your work, your habits, and it judges you. This is not a fever dream. It's Seaman, one of the most bizarre and experimental games ever made. Released for the Sega Dreamcast, Seaman fused voice recognition, real time evolution, and sardonic humor into a virtual pet simulator unlike anything else before or since. Today, we're diving into the murky waters of Seaman's development, its eccentric creator Yoot Saito, and how a lunchroom joke turned into one of gaming's strangest cult classics. So grab your microphone and let's get weird on today's trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello and welcome to the 257th episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people who have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about the companies that bring it all together, making our hobby, video games, a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we're diving into the story of Seaman, the 1999 Dreamcast title that turned players into aquatic caretakers for a wisecracking, man faced fish. We'll explore how a surreal idea hatched at a lunch table turned into a unique gaming experience thanks to the eccentric vision of developer Yoot Saito. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co host, who I'm pretty sure would get into an argument with a digital fish just for fun. He's my brother, Rob Casson. So, Rob, if you had a pet that could talk back to you, would you nurture it or provoke it?
It depends. How much does it piss me off?
Probably a lot.
Well, we're going to get a little bit of both. Because sometimes it's fun to get people riled up.
Sometimes it's fun to get anything riled up, and Seaman is a smartass, so
Hell yeah. Love to hear that.
All right, well, we got a whole story to tell, but before we get to that, why don't you share with our listeners what else happened during this current week in gaming history?
All right. Well, kicking it off, Danzig's mother,
Nice, very
later
nice.
known in the West as Earthbound Beginnings, debuted on July 27th, 1989 for the Famicom. Created by Japanese writer and musician Shigesato Itoi and developed by Ape Inc., Mother was a bold departure from fantasy RPG norms. Set in a quirky modern day America stand in, the game featured psychic children, alien invaders, and offbeat humor wrapped in a sentimental coming of age story. While it never officially launched outside Japan in its original form, it gained a cult following through fan translations and eventually saw an official Western release via the Wii U Virtual Console in 2015. The Mother series would find greater fame with its SNES sequel, Earthbound, but this original entry laid the groundwork for one of gaming's most beloved cult franchises. We covered Earthbound back in episode 40, so check that out if you want more from this strange and wonderful universe.
Earthbound's a weird game. You remember what my favorite part of Earthbound was? It was its marketing campaign. Do you remember what specifically was weird about it?
The dad was a phone.
No. Their marketing campaign was scratch and stiff, but it was scratch and stiff flavors like vomit and fart, for instance.
Ah, that's right.
Yeah, it was a weird campaign that I loved as
All
a
about
kid.
it. Sounds great.
Absolutely.
Next up, on July 27th, 1990, Nintendo gave their iconic plumber a medical license. Sort of. With the release of Dr. Mario for the Famicom NES in Japan and US. Developed by Nintendo R&D1 and produced by Gunpei Yokoi, this colorful action puzzle game tasked players with eliminating viruses by rotating and matching falling capsules. With catchy music, especially the infectious fever theme, and a clean, addictive gameplay loop, it quickly became a staple of Nintendo's puzzle lineup. Though it arrived during the peak of the puzzle game boom sparked by Tetris, Dr. Mario carved out its own identity thanks to Mario's presence and competitive multiplayer. The franchise would go on to see sequels and spin offs across Nintendo's hardware generations, including Dr. Mario 64, Dr. Luigi, and Dr. Mario World on mobile.
I'll have to find Dr. Mario World because I haven't played Dr. Mario since the NES.
I have never played a single Dr. Mario except when I played Smash.
Fair statement.
But I know the song. Everyone knows the Fever. Well, not everyone, but the
yeah,
Fever theme.
Yeah. Everyone
Oh,
knows
yeah.
Fever.
Oh, yes. Next up for this week in gaming history, on July 29th, 1994, Policenauts was released for the PC 98 in Japan, developed and published by Konami. Directed by Hideo Kojima, the creator of the Metal Gear series, Policenauts is a cinematic adventure game that blends science fiction with a detective narrative. The game follows Jonathan Ingram, an astronaut turned detective, as he investigates the disappearance of his ex-wife on a space colony. Policenauts is renowned for its deep storyline, rich character development, and Kojima's signature attention to detail, incorporating themes of space exploration, technology, and human relationships. Although Policenauts was initially only available in Japan, it garnered a dedicated following and is celebrated for its engaging plot and innovative integration of interactive and cinematic elements, influencing future adventure games and visual novels. Holy alliteration.
I'm sorry. It's fun though. Oh
Ugh.
man, we talked about Policenauts when we did Metal Gear, I think, or maybe
I'm
Metal Gear
sure we
Solid.
did, but go find that episode if you want to
Hideo
listen more.
Kojima. Go find any Hideo Kojima episode. We've probably talked about Policenauts.
Indeed. Next up, on July 29th, 2003, Microsoft released Flight Simulator 2004, a century of flight for Windows PCs. This commemorative entry in the long-running simulation series celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight by including historically significant aircraft like the Wright Flyer and the Spirit of St. Louis, alongside modern jets. Developed by Ace's Game Studio, it refined core features like real-world weather integration, AI air traffic control, and virtual cockpits, pushing the boundaries of realism for the time. The title was praised for its authenticity and accessibility, attracting both aviation enthusiasts and casual players alike. It helped solidify Flight Simulator as more than just a game. It became a virtual aviation training ground for millions, and this anniversary edition was a landmark moment for the franchise.
That was a great one. I remember being able to fly the Wright Flyer, and I thought that was so cool at the time.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, it's especially if you're into aviation. That's where it all started.
Yep,
Other than
agree.
birds and insects and all that fun stuff.
Okay, all right, nice one.
Last up for this week in gaming history, on July 27, 2007, Eat, Sleep, Play was officially formed by industry veterans David Jaffe and Scott Campbell, marking a new chapter for the creative minds behind Twisted Metal and God of War. Based in Utah, the studio was established with support from Sony Computer Entertainment and was positioned to develop with support. Sorry. Based in Utah, the studio was established with support from Sony Computer Entertainment and was positioned to develop exclusive titles for the PlayStation brand. With a focus on smaller teams and creative independence, Eat, Sleep, Play aimed to combine the energy of a startup with the experience of seasoned developers. Their debut project was Twisted Metal Head On Extra Twisted Edition, followed by a full reboot of Twisted Metal for the PlayStation 3 in 2012. While the studio would eventually pivot away from console development and lose Jaffe to other ventures, its formation represented a key moment in the evolution of independent studies backed by major publishers during the mid-2000s. We covered David Jaffe's career in detail back in episode 167 on the Twisted Metal series. So if you want to learn more about the career or more about the carnage that is Twisted Metal, maybe hear Dave and I talk about the TV show that was out at the time, go listen.
Yeah, go listen. I guess it's time, Rob.
I think so, Dave. I think this is why people are here. So,
I
why don't you get to today's topic? Which why
people
don't
are
you remind us what that is?
people are here to listen to me yap for an hour.
Yeah, about Seaman.
Uh, That's fact. Yoot Saito began his career in an unlikely place. While enrolled in Wadesa University, studying architecture. During his time there, he discovered SimCity on the Macintosh, and frankly, like so many of us, it had him absolutely hooked. Me too, buddy. Me too.
Not me, haha.
It also inspired him to pursue video game development instead of architecture. So after graduating, Saito worked for a publishing house that dabbled in experimental multimedia. And while there, he designed a simulation game as part of a future media project. It was kind of an early effort to blend entertainment and technology.
Like an
Eh,
interact. What kind of? Do we
yeah,
know anything about that?
we don't know anything about that.
Ah, boo.
We don't know anything about that. I looked for what kind of simulation it was. I am not sure. So,
Fair enough. All right.
but he enjoyed the work, he enjoyed the process, and so he wanted to do it again. And so, encouraged by that experience, he proposed developing a second title. But the company he was working for wasn't interested. We are not a video game company, they told him. So he quit. Determined to bring this vision to life, Saito struck out on his own and began developing a game that would be simply known as The Tower. He teamed up with freelance programmer Takubi Abe, building on ideas he sketched out during his first project. They were ideas around elevators and vertical spaces. Wanting to ensure authenticity in what he was designing, he even contacted an elevator manufacturer to learn about real world scheduling algorithms on elevators, but they turned him down. Not surprising.
What?
When a random guy wants to know about how your elevators schedule themselves out of the blue and for no apparent reason, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
fishy.
That could be a little concerning. I guess I could see it.
Saito created the game's early visuals himself using HyperCard, starting with a monochromatic tower that was simple in scale. HyperCard, if you don't know, we talked about it during our missed episode. That's kind of what the internet was back in the day. It was basically like a multimedia, it was like a slideshow with multimedia that you could link from one slide to another. And so people used that to make video games because, we could. As the project advanced and Macintosh performance improved, he bumped the graphics up from 16 colors to 256. He used the added colors to distinguish between types of rooms. There were offices, hotels, and residences. And at some point, he had to bring on a second artist to help animate and refine said graphics. And what emerged from this project was a thoughtful, intricate simulation game that allowed players to design and manage a high rise building floor by floor. Now, the tower, as it was known and released in Japan, would eventually catch the attention of Maxis, famous for publishing SimCity, and they would localize it and publish it worldwide under the title SimTower: The Vertical Empire in 1994. So Yoot Saito basically made SimTower as we all know it, which is surprising. I always thought it was just the SimCity team made it.
I'm not familiar with the title, so I don't have anything on that one, Dave.
I gotcha. I always assumed because there was a bunch of those games in that period: SimCity, SimTower, Sim Farm, Sim Ant, Sim Hospital. There was a bunch of them, and I kind of always assumed Maxis had just made the whole kit and caboodle. So it was surprising to learn that someone else made one of the titles.
Well, they published it.
They did, yes. So SimTower was a commercial and critical success. It won Japan's Media Arts Award the following year that it was released, and that kind of launched Saito into the spotlight as a rising voice for simulation software. And that success gave him the clout and creative freedom to start thinking even bigger and weirder. Our topic today, Seaman, came about because of it was a lunchtime conversation. It was a lunchtime conversation in jest. It was basically a lunchtime joke. And so at the time, Yoot Saito was running his own development company, Vivarium, and Vivarium was in something of a holding pattern. They weren't actively developing any new projects. They were maintaining what they had. And there was two projects that they were maintaining. One was SimTower, and the second was basically a virtual fish aquarium developed for Macintosh computers. It was a glorified screensaver that you could drop plants and fish and stuff into. The very kind of thing that you'd expect to see idling on a 90s desktop, you know?
Right.
And so during lunch one day, Saito found himself venting about how dull it was to be working on what amounted to a glorified screensaver. And so he mused aloud about how much more interesting it would be if the aquarium had some kind of twist, something dramatic. What if the fish didn't swim around aimlessly, but they grew? They would change. Maybe they would even interact with the viewer. Hmm?
Interesting.
And as part of the conversation, he remembered an old Saturday night television show. He couldn't recall which one, but there was a comedian in it that would stare directly at the camera and sneer, "What are you looking at, you dumbass?" And that image stuck with him. And so he started imagining the fish in the tank turning to the player and asking the same thing. And from there, the idea spiraled. What if the fish could talk? What if the fish had a face, a human face? It was weird. It was grotesque. But Saito couldn't shake the thought. He envisioned a fish that didn't just swim, it watched, it listened, and it remembered. The concept reminded him of sea monkeys. You know, those novelty mail order pets from. Uh, did you ever have sea monkeys?
You mean brine shrimp trilobites?
Yeah, sea monkeys are brine shrimp, yes. Yeah.
I had trilobites. Those aren't the same thing, right?
No,
Yeah, I
but
had
brine,
trilobites.
but brine shrimp are.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I've never had sea monkeys. I had trilobites.
I guess nowadays we know them as brine shrimp, but back in the time they used to like market them in magazines. These little mail order real pets called sea monkeys, and I remember them as sea monkeys too because they were always like in comic books and magazines and stuff. The thing with sea monkeys is they were a novelty, right? As I said, they were mail order pets that in the ads, as ads do, they always promised real interaction, but they never actually delivered on it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So Saito began sketching out a serious concept for a new kind of life simulation, something far beyond Tamagotchi or other virtual pets. It was a way more advanced concept than any of those, which would come, which that was the time period they would be around. This wouldn't just be a creature to feed or clean up after. This creature, he wanted it to have a personality. It would talk to the player. Like I said, it would remember past conversations. It would judge the player's behavior. It was something that would evolve both physically and emotionally. So the more the players engaged, the more the creature changed. And so he sketched all these ideas out and he shared the idea with his wife, and she thought it was gross. But she encouraged him to pursue it anyways. Saito also brought the concept to famous video game designer Shigeru Miyamoto, and he liked the idea and supported it creatively. Now, Saito credits Miyamoto as a key influence in the game's development, but his involvement largely remained behind the scenes and he's not credited as part of the game's development. And it comes as no surprise that he would go to Miyamoto because originally this game was going to be developed for Nintendo 64DD, which is an experimental disc based add on peripheral for the Nintendo 64. We've done a whole episode on the 64DD. Go check it out if you'd like to learn more. It was a flash in a pan, one of Nintendo's rare misses, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it was a miss. And as they continued to develop this game and the 64DD's platform, the fate of the platform rather, grew more uncertain, he began to explore other options. And so a turning point came when he met the then vice president of Sega. And the vice president, Soichiro Irimajiri,
Shoichiro Iri Majiri.
I will roll with that. You got
Yeah.
it. We'll just plug your voice in there.
Yeah. There you
Because
go.
we know how great I am at pronouncing these.
I'm
That's actually
probably
what
still off, it's close, but no,
that's okay. I've decided that's why I keep you around is to produce the name to pronounce the names I'm incapable of pronouncing.
yeah, that's fine with me. I do my best.
Em and Jerry saw potential in the project. I know I botched it again. So this guy saw potential in the project. No. He saw potential in the project, not in spite of its weirdness, but because of it. Sega was preparing to launch the Sega Dreamcast, and he believed that Seaman could help define the system's identity as bold, forward thinking, and experimental. That's a bold statement there that Seaman can have such an impact on something.
Very bold.
So the project shifted from Nintendo to Sega, and development on Seaman began in earnest. The first prototype of the game was developed on a Macintosh, and it would take about a year and a half to convert the code and subsequent systems over to the Dreamcast. Now, this wasn't just a graphical port. This involved building complex voice recognition, natural language processing, and these. They're some people will say AI driven behavior trees, but realistically, there's nothing AI about this game. They basically, it is just, and Saito did, he did a lecture, um, he did a lecture at GDC where game developers come and they talk about the development on a game, right? And he talked about it, and that question was specifically asked if he saw himself as an early version of AI, and he said there's nothing AI about it. These are just behavior trees that fork and fork and fork. And when someone said how many forks you think he said, he's like, I don't even want to think about that. It is probably 100,000 plus forks in this game. So it is a behavior tree like no one had ever seen before. Now, to complete the strange scientific atmosphere that they were going for, Saito knew that the game needed the right narrator, someone who could sell the idea that this wasn't just a virtual pet, but a living organism in their care. And for the English version, the team approached both Leonard Nimoy of Star Trek fame and James Earl Jones of Star Wars fame to see if they would lend their voice. And to their surprise, Leonard Nimoy, aka Spock, agreed to lend his voice.
No James Earl Jones.
No James Earl Jones.
No, that would have been a pretty cool cameo.
I read an interview with the lady one of the localizers, the English localizer. We're going to talk about her in a moment, but she basically said she didn't expect either of them to agree to it. And then later, Leonard Nimoy came back like pretty quickly and was like, "Yeah, sure." And she was like, "Okay, cool. Like, I guess we're rolling with Nimoy." So
Fair enough.
and they paid him a bunch of money to basically come in, read for an hour, and go. Like that's his part in this game because he's not the voice of the fish. Saito was the voice of the fish in the Japanese version, and well, Saito's the voice of the fish. He's the narrator of the series, so And Nimoy lended this, he has this calm clinical narration, and it kind of gives Seaman the tone of an interactive nature documentary. And so the bizarre premise of playing with Seaman suddenly felt dignified. As development progressed, the technical challenges would mount. Speech recognition in the late 1990s was clunky at best, and Seaman kind of required a system that could not only recognize words, but responded with a believable personality. And so the development team had to build these forks, right? This database of specific phrases and questions that the game would be able to interpret reliably. We've talked about language processors in the past, most commonly with the very early games. Everyone in the text days thought they could one up one another, right?
Right.
But now we're here in the voice era having to kind of do the same thing. And so these voice inputs, we're going to trigger these complex behavior driven reactions, with Seaman responding emotionally, sarcastically, or even inquisitively, depending on how the player treated him. Now, making it work in Japanese was hard enough for the Japanese team, but localizing it for the West brought to the table a whole new level of difficulty. And that responsibility fell to Mara Naomi, a localization producer at Sega of America. Now, she had handled a variety of projects before, but nothing, according to her, quite like Seaman. As she recalled in a later interview, the localization team had to work without even hearing the voice recordings, like the Japanese voice recordings during development. And that kind of meant that they were localizing personality and mood and humor without any reference whatsoever, and kind of just hoping that the final performance was going to hit the right tone. She said they kind of just had to imagine what the voice would sound like and hope for the best. And what they got was a massive script that was filled with weird, personal, and often judgmental lines. Seaman could ask you about your relationships, mock your fish keeping skills, or just sit silently in judgment. Adapting that humor, dry, sarcastic, and sometimes just outright mean, into English from Japanese for the team was a careful balancing act that had to sound natural, responsive, but still unsettling because it was a talking fish after all.
Yeah, very true.
And at the same time, that script had to stay within the constraints of the Dreamcast limited voice recognition system, which could only process very specific types of inputs. In fact, there's an anecdote during the production process where when they tested it out, the fish was getting confused because people would just keep talking to it and it would get confused by the length of this conversation. And so the fish famously says, like, you're talking too much. I need you to dumb it down for me, or it needs to be simpler. They had to do that because the voice input couldn't handle complex inputs. So Mara Naomi and the localization team kind of worked tirelessly to preserve the core experience. The idea was that Seaman wasn't just talking to you, he was also studying you. Now, internally at Sega, no one quite knew what to make of the project. But instead of burying it, Sega kind of embraced how weird it was. In Japan, they launched an ad campaign that leaned into surreal. There were close ups of human faced fish, cryptic slogans like "He is watching you," and this ominous sense of mystery. It worked. The Japanese public was intrigued. Now, in North America, Sega of America was initially hesitant. They reportedly reacted to the early builds with, "Wow, that's creepy." But they soon realized that creepy could really work in their favor. Rather than trying to normalize Seaman, they also leaned into absurdity. And so when it launched in July of 2000, Seaman was promoted with deliberately bizarre ads, positioning it as a game that you had to experience to understand. And somehow, it just worked. Rob, there's just something magical about watching a fish with a human face call you a moron. It really puts things into perspective.
Yeah, nothing quite like getting roasted by your virtual pet to remind you who's boss in the fish tank.
And while Seaman was pushing the boundaries of weird in gaming, maybe now's a good time for us to push the boundaries of your podcasting potential with Zencaster, the all in one platform that makes it easier than ever to create your own podcast.
Right, because if Yoot Saito can build an AI powered sarcastic aquatic nightmare, you can definitely record a podcast episode.
That's what I'm saying. Zencaster works right from your browser, letting you record high quality audio and video without complicated setups or downloads. Just send a link to your guest, hit record, and you're off.
And once you've got your audio, Zencaster's post production tools clean it up automatically, levels your volume, reduces background noise, and even polishes out the ums and uhs, kind of like your own personal sound engineer, minus the attitude of a talking fish.
And when it's ready to share with the world, you can publish it straight to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the major platforms right from Zencaster. There is no extra hassle.
So if you've got a story to tell about games, weird AI, or just your love of sarcastic sea creatures, Zencaster's got you covered.
Head over to zencaster.com/pricing and use our code, all one word, memory card lane, and you'll get 30% off the first month of any paid plan.
That's ZENCASTR.com. Don't wait until your game talks back. Start your podcast today.
All right, let's dive back in and see how the world reacted when Seaman finally swam into living rooms everywhere.
So, Dave, what exactly was Seaman?
All right, Rob. Well, at its core, Seaman was a virtual life simulator, but the reality is calling it that doesn't really do the experience justice. It played out more like a slow moving interactive experience, equal parts pet raising sim, philosophical conversation, and really biological oddity. You can go online, YouTube it like any game. There are a ton of let's plays for you to watch. Also, like I said, Yoot Saito did a GDC where he talked about his whole development process. It's really fascinating. When players first booted up the game, they were greeted, at least on the English side, we'll talk about, they were greeted by Leonard Nimoy's voice that calmly explained their new role as a caretaker for a rare and mysterious creature. And from there, the player gets introduced to the Seaman tank. It's a virtual aquarium where the creature would be hatched, fed, warmed up, spoken to, and eventually would evolve. The game starts out with just an egg. Over time, and with proper temperature control and care, the egg would hatch rather into a nautilus-like creature. And I mean like proper temperature control and care. Like you had to adjust the oxygen levels in the water, and you had to turn the heater on and off to keep the temperature in a specific range in order for the egg to hatch. Otherwise it wouldn't. It would just sit there. It would just sit there.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's like having a virtual fish tank, but it gets weird. It's a virtual fish tank that eventually gets weird. As the days passed, and I do mean days because this game worked in real time, the creature would molt, it would grow limbs, and eventually develop into the infamous Gillman, which is a frog like amphibian with a fully animated human face that had the ability to speak. And like I said, progression through Seaman's life stages were tied to real time. Players were expected to check in daily, much like caring for an actual pet. Neglect him and he could die. Overfeed him, same deal. But just feeding and maintaining the tank wasn't the main draw. The real draw of the game, the hook, was talking to Seaman. It This game used a custom Dreamcast microphone that plugged into the controller, and players could engage Seaman in conversations. They would sometimes be mundane, sometimes, like I said, they were philosophical, profound. They were sometimes sarcastic. That you could have various conversations with the creature. And Seaman would remember the conversation. He'd ask questions about your life, he'd ask questions about your job, he'd ask questions about your relationships. In the GDC, one guy got up there and asked, where that all came from because the Seaman accused him of having an affair. Uh,
Oh.
other times, Seaman went and sought your intelligence. This experience was much about building a relationship as it was about raising a pet. And so, kind of circling back to that, when the guy asked Saito where uh, Seaman's ideas came from, and he talked about how it wasn't so much AI as a huge behavior tree, he talked in length about how he was the only writer, and so Seaman is very much him. Like it's his personality, it's his conversation, and so in this weird way, you're almost talking with the developer of the game instead of a fish, which is kind of meta if you think about it. Um, Seaman's behavior would evolve based on how you treated him. If you were patient and kind, he would be curious and friendly with you. If you were dismissive or cruel, he could become hostile or emotionally distant. He would acknowledge if you left and returned after a long absence, kind of scolding you, sounding like he was disappointed in you. The game could recognize and respond to the tone of your voice. It would respond to the way you phrase things. Well, the voice recognition was behavior based, where it was limited to specific words and sentence structures. It still really felt ahead of its time, right?
Hmm.
And like I
Yeah,
said,
I would say so.
and like I said, beyond the conversations, it was a virtual pet thing. Like to elaborate on that, I think that was a thing at the time. That's what I want to say. I think that was a thing at the time, right? Because that's the time period. The 64DD, if you remember, was one of the um, first console anything really to have a real time clock built into it. And then the next generation of consoles, your Sonys, your GameCubes, and everything had that. And then remember, everyone started to use that. Like Animal Crossing is a famous example of a game that uses a real time clock because suddenly this was a new tool at game developers' disposal and they wanted to use it. And this here is another example of that, right? You had to maintain the right water temperature, keep oxygen levels stable, feed him regularly, in real time. These were tasks that kind of reinforce the illusion of caring for a living creature, which is a real time endeavor. That was the intention, right?
Hmm.
So eventually, after enough cultivating a relationship, interaction, after enough care, Seaman would reach his final form. The game didn't really end there. It simply got quiet. You would form a bond, you'd watch Seaman grow, and when he would eventually leave or die, there were some players that reported like feeling a sense of loss.
I mean, yeah, I can understand that, man.
Yeah, if you put a lot of time into something and it's just, I mean, if you put a lot of time into anything and then it's suddenly gone, that's understandable.
Yeah, very very normal.
What made this game so memorable wasn't so much the complexity of its mechanics, though admittedly I think it was ahead of its time technologically, but it was the way it used those mechanics. It was the way it used that technology. It made the experience for gamers feel incredibly personal. It was less about what you did and more about how it made you feel. It really blurred the line between virtual pet, interactive story, and I mean, in a lot of ways, it was a psychological experiment.
Yeah, I would agree. So, I mean, that's it's a very different idea, and you know, Yeah, it's a lot.
Well,
It's weird.
we've never heard anything like it. I mean, we've been at this for 257 episodes. Tell me anything that sounds like this.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that's just weird.
There aren't video games that want to cultivate a relationship with you. I mean, I would argue that there's really never been another video game that quite wants to cultivate a relationship with you. That All right. Let's say that there's never been a game until the AI era. AI has, of course, revolutionized that concept, and now we have AI chat bots and AI avatars that will maintain relationships. But I don't think there's another video game that has taken a crack at it like this has.
I Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about the ones that are the ones that are coming out now with AI and all of this. Obviously, I know that they are a thing, but considering the time of when this came out, that's revolutionary.
Yeah.
It's kind of, if you think about it, like an early AI. I mean, granted, it was all programmed, but
No, it was. People think that this is early AI. They genuinely do. That's why he was asked about it, because he would have been way ahead of his time and he had to say, "Nah, this is just the biggest freaking behavior tree you've ever seen."
yeah. But I mean, it seems like it could be the start, because what is AI but a behavior tree that it learned to put together itself?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say the same thing. I think it's fair to say that Seaman kind of stands alone. When it launched in Japan in July of '99, the reaction was really complicated, right? The game's weirdness was a selling point, but it also really confused a lot of people. Its surreal advertising campaign, which was full of, like I said, ominous narration, airy aquarium shots, and that grotesque human faced fish, definitely turned heads. And thanks to the novelty of the microphone interaction and a strong push from Sega, Seaman became one of the Dreamcast's early commercial successes in Japan. It was a big seller, like one of the top. I think it's a top one, the top three title for the Dreamcast, and it skewed very heavily towards women, which was unique for its time. Like it pretty much won the market for women in video games out of the bunch of them. It sold roughly 400,000 units there, which was really remarkable for a platform exclusive experimental title. But even in Japan, critics were split. Some praised its innovation, its voice interaction, and the ambition behind the concept, while others found it boring or slow. Um, it was often called downright creepy. And I think that's fair. Seaman wasn't a traditional video game by any means whatsoever. It didn't offer levels, scores, or flashy progression of any kind. What it required was patience, what it offered was conversation, and what it left you with was a strange sense of intimacy. In North America, the game launched in July of 2000, and the reception was similarly mixed. But Seaman became a cult phenomenon almost immediately here. Major outlets didn't know what to do with it. Some reviewers were intrigued and gave it good scores for originality, but others were baffled and critical of its limited gameplay. Over here, players too were divided. Those who clicked with Seaman, so to speak, found it fascinating and hilarious. Others returned it within a week, unsure of why they were talking to a judgmental fish. Uh, but over time, Seaman found its audience. The game's infamous personality, its deadpan delivery, and the fact that it would ask you things like, "Are you in a relationship?" or "Do you think people fear death?" gave it this like level of emotional awareness or resonance that no really other game had ever attempted. And truthfully, it also really paved the way for voice interactive titles, experimental, emotionally driven games. Long before there was an Alexa or a Siri, Seaman gave players a taste of what it might be like to talk to your technology and have it talk back. Judging, reacting. I
Yep, that
hate you.
Seaman sure gave you a taste, Dave.
Judging, reacting, and changing over time. There was a sequel, Seaman 2, that was released in 2007 for the PlayStation 2, but only in Japan. It expanded the setting into a terrarium with a more human like creature called Gabo and shifted from underwater evolution to tribal simulation, but it never made its way to the West. It lacked the same cultural flashpoint as the original. And to his credit, Saito later would continue his fascination with odd interfaces and hybrid genres, so to speak, in games like Odama that he's well known for. Odama is a pinball strategy hybrid that's partially controlled by the microphone on the GameCube.
Oh, interesting.
Literally, that's what it is. Like, think like warfare, like total warfare with like large scale armies, except you are launching pinballs at them, like rocks at them to take them down on the battlefield. It's literally a pinball machine. Like the rock comes back at you and you hit it back up with the flippers type deal. It's really unique and weird.
Sounds kind of cool, actually.
It's nifty. Saito also did Arrow Porter, which was a 3DS baggage sorting simulator
Okay.
that they released under the Guild 1 label. And realistically, none of those games ever reached Seaman's cult status, but they kind of reinforced what Saito is known for, his legacy, so to speak, as one of the industry's more eccentric and boundary pushing designers. And even though Seaman hasn't been officially re-released or ported in any way, fans do kind of continue to talk about it. It appears on countless weirdest games ever made lists. It's been dissected in retrospectives, YouTube documentaries, and like I said, that GDC talk. And Yoot Saito, even in that GDC, has kind of publicly expressed interest in revisiting the idea for smartphones, for voice assistant technology. In the interview I watched, he was really big about wearables, and he thought it'd be cool to integrate this into a wearable where it was constantly collecting data. Big Brother, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, he saw partnering a wearable with this concept as a really unique fit. In the end, though, Seaman wasn't just a game. It was more than a game. It was an experiment. It was a conversation. And even though it wasn't AI, it was this bizarre little window into the future of what could be interactive AI. And for a lot of people, Seaman ended up being a mirror for players to see themselves in, right?
I suppose so, Dave.
And that's it. That's the story of Seaman. Everybody loves it. Everybody wants it.
Sure, Dave. Let's go with that.
So there are other stories that we've told. Like I said, you did SimTower, which was part of the SimCity series, and we've done an episode on SimCity. We've done an episode on Maxis. We've done an episode on Will Wright. We've kind of brought all of that together into here. So if you'd like to learn more about those stories or other weird games throughout history, because we've done episodes on plenty more, you can, of course, check out our old episodes by going to our website, which is www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, what else can people do on our website?
You can find a calendar of our future episode topics. You can find a link to our Discord where you can come chat with Dave and I about episode related topics or maybe just things in gaming in general. You can find a link to our Patreon where you can help support us and get access to ad-free and unedited versions of our episodes. And you can find links to our social media where I am on several platforms as Rob_O_Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is wrong. Each week, we'll tell you a story about one topic relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game, it can be about a console. We've done it on a museum. Last week, we did it on a chimpanzee circus. All these weird things that come up in video game history. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, Of course, we told you the story of Seaman, which started out as a little lunchtime conversation and turned into one of the more unique titles in the entirety of video game history. Every week, when we sit down to do research for future titles, we learn things. That's my favorite part of the research is I'm always looking for information, something that I did not know going into this. That is my favorite part. I get excited when I find it, and then I get to teach it to you. It's this fantastic cycle of teaching and learning, learning and teaching, and in recognition and celebration of that title, every week we like to talk about what we've learned. So, Rob, what did you learn today?
Well, I learned all about Seaman, Dave.
Yes, you did.
I didn't know a damn thing about it before today.
Probably didn't even know it existed.
Hey, man, my 8th grade health class was not that good.
Nope, didn't it did not give you any insight into semen?
Not whatsoever, man. I had no clue. I didn't know it could talk back like that. That's wild.
Absolutely wild. Yeah, if you just left semen laying around, it just kind of dried up and just wilted. It died, you know?
Yeah, kind of gross.
Yeah. It's sad what happens to semen when left alone, for sure.
Yeah, but what's not sad is the fact that this game came from just a lunchtime joke.
True statement.
And
Absolutely.
that's pretty hilarious when you think about it. Like this whole concept was just like, hey, wouldn't this be cool? And then it's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yep. That's exactly what happened.
So, what about what's your favorite takeaway thingy, Mother Bubber?
I already blabbed about it, but it's the SimTower connection.
Yeah, okay.
It blew my mind finding out that SimTower was made by Yoot and not by the team at Maxis. I love SimTower. SimTower was one of the earliest simulation games I remember playing that wasn't SimCity. And I got my hands on every sim title. I loved simulation titles. Every tycoon game, every simulation titles. When I was a kid, into my teens. I wanted to play every single one of them. And SimTower is a fantastic game. Like it's still a fantastic game. But I had no clue it was made by you and localized as SimTower. That was kind of mind blowing to me, to be honest with you.
Oh, I can imagine how that would be the case.
No idea. Blindsided by that little bit of information. Absolutely blindsided. All right, Rob. Well, that'll wrap it up for Seaman's quirky evolution into a cult classic. Um, Before I take it out of here and into next week, is there anything else you'd like to add to today's episode?
Well, I will take one quick moment to say thank you so much to all of our listeners. It means the world to us that you want to join us on this journey as we make very terrible, predictable jokes. So thank you.
Seaman might not have been a massive success, but it left a unique mark on the gaming landscape. It dared to be different, pushing the boundaries of what video games could be at the time by blending real time simulation, voice recognition, and bizarre humor in a way that no one saw coming. It also showed us just how far a singular vision, no matter how strange, can go when backed by the right team and hardware. So, whether or not you remember it as a fever dream from the Dreamcast days or are hearing about it for the first time, Seaman reminds us that gaming's weirdest corners are often the ones worth exploring the most. Next week, we're surfacing from the quirky depths of Seaman to embark on an epic journey through the vibrant world of Secret of Mana. Released in 1993 for the Super Nintendo, this groundbreaking RPG redefined the genre with its real time combat, cooperative multiplayer, and stunning 16-bit presentation. From its lush visuals to its unforgettable soundtrack, Secret of Mana was a true masterpiece of its era. Join us as we uncover its magic, innovation, and legacy on next week's heroic trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Dooba-doom da ba 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 doo wop ba doo wop ba doo wop ba doo wop ba doo Seaman.